Hello, I'm Eda. I'm a second year trainee at the Welsh Blood Service in Haematology and Transfusion. Today I'm going to give a brief talk in identifying gaps and planning your progress through the STP. It particularly relates to one of the modules, individual professional development module, and it could also be helpful for people who are looking to apply for the STP because you can look at what gaps you've got in your application and hopefully successfully apply. So first, gaps can be all sorts of different gaps. So you can have gaps in your knowledge, skills. You can have gaps in practice. You might know all the knowledge, but not practice for a while. Confidence. So knowing something, but not feeling confident enough to act on it or teach it is also a gap. Recognizing these gaps is the first step to developing professionally. It directly links to one of the learning outcomes in the module SC4. So the outcome is to critically reflect and evaluate on your learning and your development. So being able to identify these gaps gives you evidence for that as well. So I'll talk about a little bit about the method I use to try and identify my gaps in my knowledge. So I go with using 3 different points. So reflections as an STP, you're reflecting on everything and anything. So I usually reflect during and after my rotations when I've been on placement to different labs. In meetings, it's always handy to take notes. And when they're discussing something that I have no clue what's going on, I like to take a note and then go find someone to say, what was this about? So that I can then pinpoint what I need to learn from it. Meetings with your training officer. Your training officer is a great person. They will know what you need to know and they will know where you need to be at the end of your STP program. So they'll be able to point you to different areas and you can then reflect on that yourself again and say if you've met these, or if you know, if you don't know. Getting feedback from anyone. I usually, after I've done some shadowing and then they've watched me perform an activity, I ask them to give me some feedback. And some people are very nice and honest. Some people are brutally honest, but this both can be very helpful in knowing what areas you need to then develop on. And you can get feedback from people you train, people that train you, or just anyone that you've given a little lab tour to. So it's nice to know how you've done, good or bad, so you can develop on that. Once you've identified your gaps, you obviously need to plan how to achieve your goals and that you've set to meet and become better at these areas. So obviously make a list. You might have lots of gaps like I did at the start of my STP. You might have just a few. It's important to prioritize. I found that focusing on 1 or 2 gaps, depending on how big they are at a time, helped me achieve better. Set goals. So I usually set goals halfway through and then for the end of what I'm trying to achieve, just to make sure that I am following on and I'm not just leaving everything to the last minute and not doing anything with them. And then it's a big part of making sure that you've planning your progress and that successfully meeting these gaps is to do research. So you want to know how you want to address these gaps and how you're going to go about doing them. So you can look at doing online courses, you can look at who you want to shadow, you can look at what areas you want to practice in more if you need the time for it, and just arrange yourself and organize how you're going to meet these gaps, because doing this independently will give you then confidence later on when you're addressing other gaps as well. You also need to choose ways of assessing your development. So you could get feedback from people, you could do reflections, you can also choose to be competency assessed at the end of it if it's a practical skill. So make sure you've set ways of how you're going to assess your development and how you're going to determine if you need further training or anything to meet this. And at the end, you've got to reflect to check that you've addressed the gap. If you haven't, then what you need to do further on to then go on addressing the gap again. Putting together this plan is a direct evidence for, I think, training activity 1 on the SC4 module. So it's important to keep everything documented. There is a log on one file that you can use, I believe, to document your progress, or you can just set your plans, keep meeting records if you've had meetings throughout this process, or just if you've been to online courses, you can use that as your evidence as well. So I'll give you a little example, one of the examples of one that I did. So I was a biomedical scientist in haematology and transfusion before going on to the STP. So I had knowledge in what the lab was, what lab skills I needed, and I knew what I had to do in the lab. But because I was a biomedical scientist, I had no management roles in my past job. So that was something I was lacking. So at the beginning of my training, me and my training officer had a meeting, and she stated that by the end of my training, I'll be involved in management roles as well. And this was a gap that we identified that I had no prior experience in. So, so my gap was management skills, and the goal I set was to develop good leadership skills. And we then went on to further identify what good meant for us and how good was going to be assessed by my training officer. I then went on to do some research. I looked at online courses and then compared these to courses that the trust offered, and we settled on one course that I could do. Enrolled onto this, and then went on to complete some online lectures, and they also had assessments, which was going to be how I was going to assess this. So my assessment was going to be complete the course, and then my training officer suggested that I could potentially lead a meeting to apply the skills I learned from the course that I'd been on. And then finally, I'm going to reflect on it. So reflect on it individually on my own from what I learned from the course, what went well, what didn't go so well. And then we thought it might also be a good idea if we have a meeting with my training officer to then discuss how things went, how she thought I did, if she's seen a difference in me in these meetings, if I'm more proactive. So get some feedback from them and then continue on to then reflect again. And it's just a whole cycle of lots of reflections until you're happy with where you've got to. And then once you've completed this whole process, you will have completed all 3 of the training activities for module SC4. So your reflection can be an activity, an evidence for one, your feedback can be another evidence for another, and you have to then present what you found. So the idea is that once I finish the course, I will then present to everyone else what I did in the course, and then they can then go on to, if they want to apply for the course themselves as well. So you act as someone who advertises for it as well. So I think that's it from me. So I think it's a useful kind of presentation if you're applying for the STP, because you can see what you don't have, but it's more for someone who's more on it than anything really.